Hi, everyone. Welcome to our new manager training featuring the topics of perfectionism, procrastination, and imposter syndrome. My name is Sophia Wooden, and my partners are Yulan Wen, Nicole Wood, Yunki Zhang. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
So start with perfectionists. Lots of people are perfectionists in space areas of their living. If you find yourself wanting to achieve perfection in most things you do, you might have a full-time perfectionist. Some clear signs that you might be a perfectionist include you cannot start a task until you are sure you can execute in flawlessness, and you take much more longer time than others to complete the task, and you see the end product as the most crucial part of the task, and you think a task is not done unless you think it's perfect. And also some factors known to cause perfectionists, they are like fears of failure and wanting to be admired or loved by others, and feelings insecurity or inadequate, and attachment problems with parent during the childhood, and living periods higher achievable. And therefore, some positive and negative impacts of being a perfectionist. The positive say you have the highest ambitions, and also increase your overall motivations. You might do great at school or at job, and perfectionist, it can increase your level of perseverance, and you will have a pretty high standard if you are perfectionist, and you also pay attention to detail. But there are some negatives impacts here. Being a perfectionist is like unpredictable and unproductive. Also, you have they also have some negative impacts here, like people being unprofessional. They also have some negative impact here, but people being perfectionists becomes unproductive because they have a high standard to themselves, so they are stressful. Also, is not very happy and might harmful to the corporate Koreans. You might not be able to figure out what's real important. Time management also is a problem for the perfectionists. There are also some negative impacts on being a perfectionist. The first one is people can be unproductive and might be quite unhappy due to you have a high standard on yourself. Also, it might be harmful to your corporate careers. You are not able to figure out what's real important since you always focus on one spot that you want to be perfect. And time management also is a problem for perfectionists, and mental issue relate to the perfectionist. And we need to remember nobody is perfect anyway. So here is some tips to give your employees to overcome the perfectionist. The first one, set achievable goals for yourself. Setting attainable goals will keep you from pursuing attainable perfection. This way, you can achieve your goals with the resources you have. The second one, set time limits for tasks and make sure to follow them to avoid spending excess time trying to perform the perfect task. I create a realistic time limits and stick to it. And last one, remember that mistakes are not bad. We need to celebrate that since we find out, and we just need to fix it in time. Yeah, thank you.
So there's some factors that lead to procrastination. The first one is perfectionism. So perfectionism and procrastination are actually very related because they both kind of create this cycle of like putting off a task because you're scared you're not going to complete it perfectly, or you're scared that it's too high above your ability level. or will take longer than it actually will. And that can cause a cycle that is very detrimental to performance and the mental health of the employee. So the second one would be poor time management. So some employees do not know how to manage their time well. For example, they do less work in the beginning and procrastinate the important and more time-consuming tasks and leave those to the end, and that can be also detrimental. The third one would be lack of motivation. So employees may find certain tasks boring, frustrating, difficult, ambiguous, unstructured, not rewarding, or lacking in personal meaning. So that will definitely affect their procrastination as well. And lastly is bad habits. So if you kind of get into the habit of procrastinating, then you're likely to continue doing that. And so if an employee is a perfectionist and always procrastinates, as a manager, you should lead the employee to reduce your standard when there is a time limit. It's impossible to get everything perfectly in when there is such a time limit. Monitoring anxiety, this can be detrimental to employees' health. So they have to make sure that they are okay and be focused on yourself and not what others think. For an employee, that is extremely important because that is where some perfectionism can string in and lead to procrastination.
If an employee has poor time management, you should lead the employees to first determine the priority of tasks based on urgency and also find out what needs to be done first and then work in order. And then make a to-do list every day. It can help your employee better decide how to separate their time to work on specific tasks. Remember to list out tasks in order of priority of that day and working order. And also remember to include deadlines to remind your employees how much time they still have. And also remember when they finish one, cross it out. It can better track how many tasks they still need to be working on. And the next strategy is to disconnect. Sometimes people procrastinate because they are easily distracted. When an email, message, or just a notification comes in, people will spend time on their cell phone and forget about their work. So turning their cell phone off or putting it into do not disturb mode would help your employee better focus on their tasks. And for the second scenario, if an employee has a lack of motivation, you should lead the employee to first reverse the procrastination triggers. For example, when your employee find their task boring, try to make it as a game. Like see how many words they can write out in 20 minutes. It will help to reverse the boring text into a more interesting one. And also reversing the procrastination triggers would motivate them to focus for a longer time. And let's down the cause of procrastination. Sometimes people procrastinate because they do not think about or forget the consequence. When less them out, employees can make the decision to work or to delay their work more rationally, especially when the consequences are really big, like possibly lose their important clients. And the next strategy is to set short-term and long-term SMART goal. An example of a SMART goal can be finishing their work one day before the deadline for the next whole month. And those goals can give them a specific, measurable, aggressive, relevant, and time-bound target to work on and motivate your employee when they want to procrastinate again. And also set rewards and punishment for procrastination for their goals. So that can reinforce the positive behaviors and reduce the negative behaviors, which can motivate your employees to reduce procrastination. And the last scenario, if an employees get used to procrastinating, you should lead the employee to first just do something, anything to get started. The hardest thing is to get started. For example, your employee might find your task difficult. When they start their task, it might be easier than they thought before. And also work within their resistance level. An employee might resist working on a project for 10 hours, but breaking it down into 1 hour or just 30 minutes, they might feel better starting working on it.
So finally, I want to discuss tackling imposter syndrome. So some signs of imposter syndrome definitely correlate with the signs of perfectionism and procrastination. A lot of times it can be a result of people feeling like a fraud. Another sign is the inability to accept praise. So only focusing on the issues and problems with what you're doing rather than seeing these small successes for what they are. A huge one is beliefs that you are inadequate. So whether that's comparing yourself to your peers and the people that you work with, feeling like you are the only person that sticks out and is really out of place. Another sign can be exhausting yourself after each work day, having a little bit of energy when you go home, and then starting it over again the next day. It's really a struggle to be successful when each day you're draining yourself. And then one I want to touch upon is the sign of making a big deal over minor mistakes. So only being able to focus on your issues. So let's get a little bit into why employees might feel like an imposter. Number one, they are ill-equipped or incapable of job tasks. So in reality, sometimes people can feel like an imposter syndrome. People can feel imposter syndrome because they're actually not in the right role. Sometimes when we apply to jobs that don't fit us or our values or our abilities, and then we end up accepting them and taking them on, even though we don't have the things that are capable to effectively complete that job, that's when you can feel like an imposter if you're not in your right job. Number two is that their workplace environment doesn't support them, and therefore they're uncomfortable to perform to the best of their ability. So your workplace environment is very, very impactful with how you're going to have success and complete each of your tasks. Sometimes if you're in a toxic work environment, or if you simply just don't know any of the people that you work with, that can really negatively impact the way that you're able to complete your work and think about yourself within your workplace. And then finally, which is perhaps the most impactful reason for employers to know, is that their managers actually fail to encourage employees to focus on their work in the process and not just the outcome. A lot of times managers can just look at employees and ask for a product and the finished look, when a lot of times it's important to focus on the learning process that took to get there, to get to the outcome, and to see that there's growth within that. So next, I want to get into how imposter syndrome is damaging to both the employees and employers. In imposter syndrome, individuals can end up folding when under pressure, as they're unsure of how to handle their feelings of being an imposter rather than finding possible solutions. So when you're always stuck in that mindset that you don't really know how to improve and that you're always going to be in this place, that's really a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset. In a growth mindset, you're able to figure out possible solutions and improve your work rather than focusing on these small issues that might not be able to be fixed. Another way that it's damaging to employees and employers is that it can lead to procrastination, as we talked about before. So by putting off assignments out of fear, they won't be able to finish it to necessary high standards. A lot of employees end up not completing work on time and meeting those deadlines, which negatively affects the employer and the employee, because employees aren't able to perform to the ability that they said they would, and constantly putting things off just contributes to that procrastination, and employers aren't receiving what they need in the time span that they asked, which is why managers should take it very seriously. And then lastly, they might overproduce or overprepare. This correlates with that concept of perfectionism. So whether that's just spending too much time on a task that doesn't need all the time, to prove that they're capable or not, it can lead to a lot of burnout. I want to lastly talk about overcoming imposter syndrome. I really liked this graphic of 9 ways for employees to improve their own imposter syndrome. Feel free to share it with your employees. But for managers, you have a lot to do with the way employees feel about themselves. It's your role to promote a positive work environment and really provide emotional and mental support for your employees. A lot of times, imposter syndrome employees feel like they somehow got to this position without actually having to put in the hard work, which makes them feel like they don't have the ability to complete the job. When in actual reality, you need to remind them that you chose them for this role because you know that they're capable of completing it in the best way possible. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. Please let us know if you have any questions or concerns.